So UFC 313 just wrapped up, and I'm going to run through the whole card and give you guys a recap of what happened. Now, just before I jump into the fights, I want to give you some background on the actual event itself. Now, I woke up around 2-ish hours before the main card started. You know, I'm Australian, so it starts pretty early in the morning. And turns out a couple of hours before, so around 4-ish hours before the card actually started, the Curtis Blades plus Rizvan Cunha fight and the Chris Gutierrez fight had both been cancelled just hours prior to the actual event. So already off the bat, this card was not off to a great start, but then I tuned in and watched the first early prelim fight of Jalin Santos versus Ozzy Diaz. So I predicted this fight would end by a decision with Jalin Santos taking a win. It did actually go to a decision, but in reality Ozzy Diaz won it. First round, very low volume from both the fighters. Ozzy Diaz is targeting more parts of the body, I think. He's mixing up his shot selection while Jalin Santos is sort of throwing the same jab over and over again. And it did turn into a bit of a jab for jab competition where this first round was a bit of a swing round. Moving into the second though, Ozzy starts picking up that pace and starts targeting with more powerful shots, and it's looking like he's winning that round. But then halfway through the round-ish, Jalin Santos just starts throwing these combos. He ditches this one jab technique and goes for like a jab hook or a jab cross or jab cross uppercut, just mixing it up more, and he starts out volume punching Ozzy. Ozzy lands the more powerful ones, but Jordan's just sort of outlanding him, which I think racks him up that round. And then moving into the third, it's probably 1-for-1, and Ozzy Diaz just starts landing these power punches on Djordan and starts sort of making him wobbly, starts sort of putting him out slightly. There's a bit where he looks a bit out on the feet, but I don't think he was actually going to be knocked out from anything that he was throwing. There was a head kick near the end, which I thought was going to do it, but didn't end up doing it. And overall, it went to the cards, and I think Ozzy Diaz won the first somewhat. It was a pretty close first, but then the third was just a dominant beating over Jalin Santos, and he took home the win. And next up on the card was Marion Santos versus Francis Marshall. Now, I actually had this one going to Marion Santos by round 3 finish. In reality, Marion Santos won, but by a decision win, and a pretty close, controversial split decision at that. In the first round, Francis Marshall was just landing more. He'd have this jab calf kick combo that would just keep getting Marion Santos and really hurt his front leg while also sort of throwing him off balance at multiple points. He even gets a knockdown, I think, with it, and then Marion Santos gets back up and actually knocks down Francis Marshall. So they're sort of 1-for-1 at that point. And then a bit later in the fight, Marshall really hurts Marion Santos with a pretty nasty left hook knockdown. And I think that was enough to win him that first round. And then moving on to the second, Marshall slowed down a lot. This could potentially be due to Marion Santos constantly hitting him in the nose with this stiff jab. And at the end of the fight, this nose was just leaking blood. But this was definitely a harder round to score, and I think Santos wins based off damage. Marshall did shoot a few takedowns. I think he actually got a good takedown halfway through, but he didn't really do much with it, and Santos just kind of crawled his way back to the cage and stood back up again. And then in the third round, Marshall started overthrowing, and he started getting caught by these counters. He was trying to get these overhands, trying to finish the fight, but Santos would just sort of counter when he overthrew, and Santos was kind of pushing the pace. He kept throwing these teep kicks that I think sort of wore Marshall down throughout the fight. But it was a very close fight, and the second round definitely was a swing round. And ultimately, I think Marion Santos did win. But I can 100% see how, if you value sort of takedowns more than damage, you would see that Francis Marshall won. But either way, very close decision, and Marion Santos won that one. And following that fight, we had Alex Morono versus Carlos Leal. I predicted that Carlos Leal would win by a decision. Turns out Carlos Leal got the job done a lot quicker. He finished Alex Morono in the first round. So the fight starts off, they both sort of trade blows. They're just sort of striking with each other in a very generic fashion. And then Carlos Leal sort of hits Alex Morono with this one punch that sort of sends him stumbling back into the cage. And it's like, once he hits the cage, his back hits the cage, it's just he's throwing overhands. He throws so many overhands the minute he's backed up into the cage. He starts throwing these hooks where he's just not bending his elbow, so it's sort of like punching people with the side of his hands. Leal did a really good job at not getting too crazy and like trying to dive in there and finish early. He'd get him in a little clinch, like the minute he tries to leave the cage, he'd get him in a little clinch and just start like kneeing him in the body, sort of throwing elbows at his head and sort of push him back up against that cage. And it got to the point where he hit him with something very, very hard, and Morono was like out on his feet for a full minute. Like he ran to a different section of the cage, sort of a different wall, and would just start throwing overhands while Carlos Leal would just wait and sort of throw these straight jabs directly into his head. And it eventually ended where Morono sort of bent over, covering his face, and Leal just started throwing these hooks and wailing away on his head, and the ref had to come in and call it off. So Carlos Leal won via round 1 KO. And moving on up the prelims, we had Bruno Ferreira versus Armen Petrosyan next. I had it going that Bruno Ferreira was going to finish Armen Petrosyan by knocking him out in the first round. Bruno Ferreira did win this one, but it was by a round 2 submission of all things, which I didn't expect going into this. This was a really, really fun fight. In fact, most of the fights from Morono versus Leal onwards were really, really fun fights to watch, and this card was really, really good for that. But this fight opens up. Bruno Ferreira's coming out there as he usually does. If you've seen any Bruno Ferreira fight, you know what he's doing here. He comes out, he just starts throwing these big power punches, these big overhands. He's waiting patiently for Armen to sort of open up his guard a little bit so he can throw this massive overhand and clip him with it. He actually does clip him a few times, but nothing that sort of wobbles him or puts him out. And then around 30 seconds to 45 seconds into the fight, Armen throws his first sort of strike at Bruno Ferreira, being an inside leg kick, and he grazes the bottom of his cup. Now, I don't think this was as big of a sort of cup shot as Bruno Ferreira made it out to be, but either way, Bruno Ferreira gets his time, recovers, goes back to the middle of the octagon, and then from this point onward, Armen actually puts on a very good pace on him. He uses his Muay Thai sort of knees, his straight jabs, just really his whole arsenal to sort of target multiple parts of the body and slow Ferreira down. But very shortly after that first cup shot, he throws another inside leg kick and very cleanly kicks him straight in the cup. And this one was really bad. This one was like direct on. It was clearly not a graze or anything like that. And for that reason, they deduct a point from Armen Petrosyan. Now, it's unfortunate because Armen Petrosyan probably won that first round. He definitely in the second half sort of outstruck with his straight jabs and his knees, and he was kind of putting a pace on Bruno Ferreira and sort of slowing him down and preventing him from sort of blitzing him with his big knockout punches. But because of that 1 point deduction, it evens out to about a 9-9 round. And when they move into the second, Petrosyan keeps that pace. In fact, I think he won the second round, but he didn't quite make it to the third. Petrosyan, he's keeping that pace, he's throwing his knees, he's throwing his straight jabs, he's sort of doing bits and pieces to Ferreira, sort of targeting different parts of the body. And then Ferreira counters by throwing this sort of hook to the body, and it hits him in the leg, or maybe if you're being generous, to the liver. And Armen says that he's been hitting the cup. Now, they review the footage, wasn't actually hitting the cup, it looked at like the leg, the upper leg to me, but it could have also been the liver. Either way, it doesn't really matter where it hit, because the minute they continue the action, Bruno Ferreira whips back and kicks him directly in the liver. And this was like, you could tell that this really sort of zeroed out Armen's cardio and sort of maybe winded him a little bit, because he showed it. You could tell that he got hit directly in the liver. So anyway, he's backing up a little bit. Bruno Ferreira takes his chance to sort of Roman Reigns spear him into the side of the octagon and takes him down. And they wrestle for a bit. Ferreira's not really doing much in the wrestling. In fact, he ends up on bottom position somehow, and it looks like Petrosyan's about to get up, and Ferreira it looks like he's going for a rear naked choke. Petrosyan falls on his back, Ferreira's on the back trying to get this rear naked choke in, and he gives up on it, and it looks like Armen Petrosyan's about to get back up again, and then Bruno Ferreira just grabs the arm and gets him in an armbar submission and finishes the fight that way, which I did not expect, but it was a very, very smart move from him, and overall this fight was just fireworks. Yeah. And to wrap up the prelims, we had Joshua Van versus Rei Tsuruya. Now, I predicted that Joshua Van was going to win this by decision. Joshua Van did end up winning this by decision, but I was a bit worried when I made that prediction of how close the fight would be. I was worried that Rei Tsuruya possessed such a sort of grappling threat that it might overwhelm Josh Van and he might get held down for 3 rounds and lose the fight through that. Little do I know that Joshua Van has some of the best takedown defense I've ever seen in my life. So throughout the fight, Rei Tsuruya shot 20 to 24 takedowns. I can't remember how much exactly. I think it was 22 or something like that. He only landed about 4 of them. Josh Van only hit the ground 4 times throughout the fight. And even when he did, he would just sort of work his way back up, or he'd literally throw Tsuruya off him and just stand back up. And on the feet, he was a threat this fight. He was hitting Tsuruya with these long combos of sort of a jab, cross, hook, overhand, uppercut, cross, jab. It was like just these different combos every single time, pushing him up against the cage and just sort of piecing him up. And then Tsuruya, out of panic, throughout the fight would just shoot, and Joshua Van would either scramble and just sort of like lay on top of him, and then they'd both separate, stand back up again. Joshua Van would do his thing, sort of tee off on him, and then Rei Tsuruya would just shoot again, and Joshua Van would defend it. Even up against the cage, he would just push him down and then break it up and then just keep teeing off on him. And this was one-way traffic. It ended up going to a decision. It was a 30-27 from all 3 judges, rightfully. There wasn't anything he did that deserved a 10-8, unfortunately, because he wasn't really doing anything. It was more about what he was preventing from happening. But if the judges scored takedown defenses more than, they really do now, they realistically should, but we'll get into that. He would have got a few 10-8s, I'm sure, but overall, an amazingly dominant performance from Josh Van. I think next fight he deserves a ranked opponent within the flyweight division. They need someone fresh like this, and someone this well-rounded definitely needs to get a fight in the top 15 soon. So yeah. And then starting off the main card, we had King Green versus Mauricio Ruffy. Now, from the jump, you could tell that Ruffy was dominating the fight. I said that Ruffy was going to get a round 2 KO this fight. He ended up getting a round 1 finish this fight, which was crazy. I was kind of worried about Bobby Green's chin. I thought it was going to be too much for Ruffy to crack, especially after that Lontop performance, but I guess Lontop just has a granite chin or something, because this fight finished quick. So right from the jump, Mauricio Ruffy was pushing King Green backwards and pretty much got his back against the cage instantly. And you can sort of tell that Bobby Green realized, like, oh, hold on. Like, he is so used to pushing the pace on other people that he isn't used to sort of being backed up to the cage and having to sort of get out. So every time he tries to move forward, Mauricio Ruffy would feint these sort of jabs or these shots or kicks that would sort of force King Green to back up a little bit and sort of drop his hands to protect himself. Now, this eventually led to Mauricio Ruffy feinting this left hook that went out pretty far. I actually thought he was going to throw this left hook. It slightly dodges down, sort of hits him in the chest a little bit, but doesn't impact him at all. And then from out of nowhere, he whips around and spinning wheel kicks Bobby Green to the head, putting him out cold. Like, this was a bad knockout for Green. Yeah, very quick fight, over very quickly. Mauricio Ruffy is a top dog. And yeah. And then we move on to the second fight on the main card, which was Amanda Lemos versus Iasmin Lucindo. I predicted that Amanda Lemos would win this fight just based off her sort of experience. I said that was going to be done by a decision, and I got it completely correct. Amanda Lemos won this one by decision. Pretty clear decision at that. So Iasmin came up very hot off the start. I was kind of worried that Iasmin might actually finish Lemos within the first round, because she comes out with these late head kicks that sort of whisk by, and you could see that Lemos wasn't really comfortable because of how quick they were. So she sort of backed off a little bit, didn't really throw anything on the feet, which I was surprised at, and she just sort of waited. And then the minute Lucindo sort of overthrew on one of these kicks and sort of wobbled a little bit, Lemos would just shoot in and take her down and then sort of maintain top position for the rest of the round, and that's how she won most of the fight. There was a bit of striking in round 3, I think it was, which resulted in Lucindo actually getting top position on Lemos, but near the end of that round, Lemos reversed it, got top position on her, and sort of did the exact same thing. While she was on top position throughout the fight, she was actually throwing some elbows to try and get some damage points in there, which was nice, but it wasn't a very exciting fight at that, and the decision was pretty clearly Lemos. Yeah, not much else to say about this one. And then we arrived to the third fight on the main card and the last fight before the co-main event, Jalin Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes. Now, Prior to this, I predicted that Ignacio Bahamondes was going to finish Jalin Turner in the second round by a knockout. He actually got it done way earlier in this fight with a first round submission win, which I was surprised at. So in the first round, they run out, they fight for the center of the octagon, and they're just throwing everything. You could tell that sort of they were trying to match the theme of all the fights leading up to this, because they were sort of phone boxing, you know, close quarters, sort of throwing strikes at each other, kicking each other's legs, just really fighting until someone sort of backs up, and at that point sort of that will determine who pushes the pace of the fight. Weirdly enough, somehow like Ignacio ends up on bottom position. He sort of falls backwards and sort of takes Turner with him, and at that point Ignacio's on bottom, Turner's on top position, and he's trying to land some ground and pound on him, which we've seen Jalin Turner on top position. It can actually be quite dangerous in the case of the Bobby Green fight. Anyway, Bahamondes, while he's sort of getting struck at, he grabs one of the wrists of Turner, and while Turner's trying to get his wrist back, fighting the hands of Ignacio Bahamondes sort of sneaks his legs up to sort of Turner's shoulder area, and then out of nowhere he sort of whips them around, snaps them around, and locks in a triangle choke on Jalin Turner. And by the time Turner notices this, he's already like deep in it, like there's no getting out. He tries to hold out for a little bit, but eventually it's just too much, and he taps, and Ignacio Bahamondes wins in a first round submission win. And then we move on to the co-main event, Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev 2. I predicted that Justin Gaethje was going to win this one by a decision win. Granted, when I made my prediction, I thought it was going to be 5 rounds, but I wouldn't have really changed my prediction much with 3. The same sort of points I made still stood with a 3-round bout. And I'd like to say that I think I was correct, because Justin Gaethje went to a decision and won. I also said that I thought that this was going to be a repeat of the first fight, especially with sort of Rafael's long layoff and sort of lack of a camp and injuries, and I think I was right with that as well. So basically in the first round, Fiziev came out swinging. He targeted the legs, he targeted the head, he targeted the body, and he found a lot of success targeting that body. Like, he would throw kicks, he'd throw knees in the clinch, he'd sort of straight down the middle and just hit him directly in the abdomen area. And you could see that these punches and strikes and kicks were sort of adding up, and Gaethje, like from the first round, was starting to look a bit like exhausted. And then near the end of the first round, somehow there was this weird little takedown thing where no one really meant to take anyone down, but somehow Gaethje ended up in north-south with Fiziev, and Fiziev sort of leans back, locks him up with his legs, with his head, and just kind of like sits on his head and just has free access to rain down elbows on Gaethje's sort of side area, his body. And I was thinking, geez, man, this might finish soon, because Gaethje has taken so much punishment to the body. I don't know if he can keep a pace on for the second and third round. Anyway, the horn sounds, and they go back to their corners. Round 2 starts, and straight off the bat, I noticed Fiziev's just throwing less. He's mainly targeting the body because he saw success in the first round from targeting the body, but Gaethje just sort of somehow, I don't know how, after taking so many body shots, just starts picking up the pace and starts landing these power shots on Fiziev. And they were adding up, and then halfway through the second round, Gaethje lands this uppercut, which should have put him out. Realistically, it would have put any other lightweight fighter out. Somehow Fiziev survives on the ground. Gaethje doesn't really follow up with ground and pound. He sort of dives on him, but just can't manage to finish it. And they sort of get back to the feet and start striking. Gaethje's winning most of the exchanges, and they move into the third. Fiziev just doesn't pick up the pace again. It's just a repeat of the first fight. Gaethje keeping the same pace, outstriking Fiziev at every chance. A lot of the fight, Gaethje would dive in and sort of enter a clinch with Fiziev, which was a really weird choice, I thought. I was thinking, if you're Gaethje, you don't want to enter the clinch. While in the clinch, Fiziev would try and get the knees in or try and just hold him there and sort of prevent himself from getting hit. And on the way out of the clinch, Gaethje would sort of duck his head, or he'd pull Fiziev's head down and hit him with an uppercut, or he'd sort of back away and then hit him with a hook. That's where he got most of his damage from, exiting the clinch, and he got him every single time with it. And eventually that it just added up to the decision. Gaethje, I think, probably 2 rounds to 1, I think, on all the scorecards. And he took another decision victory over Fiziev. And now's the time for the main event, Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. Boy, do I have some opinions on this fight. I predicted that Alex Pereira was going to get a late fight KO. I said round 4 KO. Alex Pereira didn't even win this one. Magomed Ankalaev won and knew taking the belt home. He won by a decision win, and I'm just going to break this one down because it was a fight to say the least. First round, Alex won in my opinion. Both of the fighters didn't really throw much, but Alex kept sort of calf kicking Ankalaev throughout the whole round. He was consistently just doing damage to the front leg of Ankalaev. And I'm thinking, okay, he's sort of taking his time to get into it. He's trying to set up these bases that he can later sort of take advantage of. If he can take Ankalaev's front leg, he might have to switch stances, which would open him up to sort of that left hook. So Alex won that first round. Moving into the second, Alex starts doing the same thing, chopping at that front leg of Ankalaev. But Ankalaev just starts hitting Alex with these powerful shots, and one wobbles him and sends him back into the cage. It didn't really put him out or anything like that. It wasn't anything crazy, but Alex sort of bounces off the cage, sort of lost of composure. He slowly gets it back, but man, and at this point Alex sort of starts losing control of the octagon. He's always on his back foot. Ankalaev's always pushing the pressure and forcing him backwards, and man, like Alex just wasn't throwing anything. Third round, similar to the first, with little volume thrown by both the fighters, except this time they're sort of incorporating straights, jabs and crosses. Ankalaev's trying some hooks out, but man, Pereira just keeps targeting that front leg, and at this point I'm thinking just give up on it. Ankalaev's throwing teeps that keep landing on Pereira, and I'm thinking these are going to add up. These are going to sort of slow down Pereira, and I think they did. But I think Pereira actually won the third round. Oh, I don't even know. It was a very close round, the third, and I think it's the closest of all of the fight. But Ankalaev landed better sort of headshots. Pereira was just sort of landing all round, but man, it was hard to tell. Round 4, this was very clearly Ankalaev's round, but the reason why I don't really like, it was a similar situation to the Jose Aldo Mario Batista fight, in which holding someone up against a cage will win you a round. Now, I don't really like that. I think it's a rather cheap way to win, because listen, there's takedowns and then there's that. Takedowns, it requires skill to sort of take someone down to the ground and hold them on the ground and sort of jeopardize with submissions or ground and pound. Holding someone up against a cage like that, it really resulted in nothing except for just scoring up points for Ankalaev. Ankalaev shot 6 takedowns in this fight and didn't even land a single one, and at the end of round 4, Alex actually flips Ankalaev over and sort of plants him on his back. It doesn't count as a takedown because I think it was after the bell, but still, 6 takedowns and like 0 times you're on the ground. I think we should start sort of incorporating that into the score. Either way, round 5 starts and Alex starts throwing now, but it just didn't look like it used to. Alex, he only throws like about 20 shots out of this whole fight to the head, with most of his shots coming to the legs and trying to damage that front leg, and by this point I just think it's too late. He sort of tries to throw these straights. He looks very nervous to even sort of try and stand with Ankalaev, which is really weird because we thought it was going to be the other way around. And at this point he lands a really stiff jab and pops Ankalaev's head back, but the minute he does that, Ankalaev just shoots in and gets another takedown, holds him up against the cage and does the same thing. And man, overall it was a really bad performance from Pereira tonight. Like, it didn't look like his usual self, and he looked a bit worried to even get the fight started. In the Khalil fight, the first 2 rounds it looked bad, but later in the fight you could sort of see him pick up and sort of find his tune. But I feel like every single time Ankalaev wrestled him to the fence, the momentum reset and he had to sort of start again, start with those calf kicks, sort of wear him down a little bit, then maybe throw like a jab or 2, but then he'd just get taken up against that cage again and just the momentum resets. Ankalaev and knew. He said that everyone will be saying no Sharma, it's Ankalaev time, so I guess it's Ankalaev time now. Yeah, this was a really disappointing main event and really let the overall sort of 313 card down a little bit, but man, what can you do? And yeah guys, that's it. That's UFC 313. I actually did pretty well on this event. Out of all the fights, I got 80% of the predictions correct on who would win, And of those winning predictions, I got 50% of the methods correct, which I think is pretty good for methods. Cam did a little worse, 70%. I mean, maybe next time. Overall, if I had to rank this card, I'd have to put in A tier. It would be an S if the main event was, not even the main event, the title fight was really good, but man, the title fight was just disappointing. And it's not even that Pereira lost as a Pereira fan. It's the way like the fight went out. It was not at all. No one showed a really dominant performance worthy of a title in that fight. So, man, but outside of that, it was a really fun card. I mean, you had such fun fights from sort of Carlos Leal onwards. You had your Josh Van, you had Justin Gaethje and Fiziev putting on just an insane performance. Bahamondes, Green and Ruffy, like, oh my god, this card had some really fun fights to watch. But yeah, overall, after this card, I mean, as a Pereira fan, yikes, jeez, man. Yeah, but you know, Ankalaev said if he beats Pereira, everyone's gonna be chanting no Sharma, and it's Ankalaev time. So guess what, guys? It's Ankalaev time, baby. Yeah, that's it, guys. See you later.